My name is Alan Smith. You have found your way to the Consumer Reports Mississippi Water Safety webinar. We're going to be having a wide-ranging chat today about some of the testing that we hope to do in the state of Mississippi and why we believe that everyone should have access to high-quality, affordable water, drinking water, regardless of where you are. We're going to be talking today about our test, which is going to be specifically looking at both heavy metals, lead and arsenic, and a category of chemical called Pfas. These are man-made chemicals used in a vast number of consumer industrial products, but you've probably heard them referred to as forever chemicals. But as we get through this conversation, I just want to give you a quick sense of what this is all going to look like. We're going to start off with a chat about what we already know, what's happening in Mississippi. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can work together and what's going to be specifically in the testing that we hope to do with y'all's help. We're going to hopefully leave some good time for you to ask us questions and talk through how this is all going to work. And hopefully, again, we'll have you out of here by about 12:50 your time. A few quick housekeeping notes. This is the launch of this project. We're going to be working together for hopefully the rest of the summer and into the fall to get a really great sense of where water is and is not high quality in the state of Mississippi. We are recording this webinar to share. I mentioned that for two reasons. One, so that everyone only puts into the conversation what you would be fine being recorded and shared out into the world, and also not to worry too much if something goes by too quickly. I say that because we will be sending you a recording, so you can also go back and find anything that you need. There are closed captioning as an option. It should be available at the bottom of your screen. You should be able to toggle that on by hitting the closed caption button. Please do continue to introduce yourselves in chat. I'm seeing people going by, and nice to see all of you. And thank you for joining us from around Mississippi. It's exciting to see the different counties roll in. Excuse me. And then we hope you will ask questions of both me as your MC, and also of the excellent experts that will be riding along with us today, who I will introduce in just 1 second after I tell you all a little bit about our community code of conduct. Our request is that you assume best intentions of all participants, that you engage in our conversations today in a mindful way, understanding that your fellow participants may be coming from very different lived experiences around water and around how they engage with this question. We ask that you speak from your own perspective and tell your own stories, refrain from any personal attacks or comments, but that includes on appearances or voices, and focus on topics under the discussion as much as you can. By attending this webinar, you are agreeing to these basic ground rules, which Calvin has then very kindly dropped into the chat as well. This means that if you don't adhere to these rules, we do have permission to remove you from this discussion. That's not going to happen today. We're all in good hands here, but I just want to throw that out early so everyone understands the rules of the road. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you the people who are riding along with me. So first of all, we have James, also known as Jim Rogers, who is the Consumer Reports Director of Food Safety Research and Testing. He's going to be handling the details of the testing stuff. Can you come on and say hi, Jim? Where are you in the world right now?
Hi, Alan. Thank you for the invite, and hello to all of our participants. I am presently residing in Bowie, Maryland.
All right. And we also have Jerry, also known as Boo Mitchell, who is the founder of the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. Jerry, which county are you in right now?
I'm in Rankin. I'm in Rankin County, actually. So it's good to be with everyone. Yeah, I think this is an incredibly important topic for Mississippi, because clean water is, we sometimes take it for granted, and it's we have a lot of different water systems in Mississippi, and some of them are to be honest, not very good. There are a lot of boil water notices, across this state every day. So I'm grateful to be a part of this project.
Thank you very much for joining us. And I think we'll spend the next 45 minutes or so unpacking as much of those different layering problems as we can here. So also riding along with us from Consumer Reports, you'll see him in the chat, you'll see him in question and answer. I don't think he's going to come on and say hi right now, but know he's there. Calvin Jackson, who's another organizer working with me at CR. And hi, Calvin. Thank you for being here. So as a general, statement of purpose to kick off this webinar, but also this project, we believe that water should be affordable, it should be high quality, and it should be accessible to everyone. As Jerry was just mentioning, not only is it vital to basic functions of human life, but the general sort of degradation of our public water systems have been amplified, and it's continued to be an even larger problem in the age of COVID-19. So we're focused on testing to make sure that water quality is high, but also on making sure that people continue to have access to water. That's preventing water shutoffs, investing in municipal infrastructure, and to the testing and the high quality, the accessibility question is so tied up in the high quality question, right? We can't assume that just because you can turn on the tap and something comes out, that means that you were all set and that it is drinkable and acceptable. America is still very divided into those who have access to safe and affordable drinking water and those who don't. And as we have seen in our research nationally and starting our research in Mississippi, communities of color are disproportionately affected by this inequity. And we want to kind of get to the bottom of how that inequity is playing out in the state. So I want to bring Jerry back here. Jerry, I guess from a starting point, you're an investigative journalist. You've looked at all sorts of interesting Mississippi-centered stories. When did you get your teeth into water? What brought you into this as a thing that was worthy of your time and effort?
Well, it's a whole team of us. It's not just me. I'm part of what's called Mississippi Spotlight. So it's us, the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting. It's Mississippi Today. It's Mississippi Public Broadcasting, Clarion Ledger, and the Jackson Advocate, and we're all working on these issues and been writing about them. And so we started really came to the fore. There have been issues we've written about in the past, but really came to the fore, when a little over a year ago, when there was the freeze in Jackson, and suddenly the capital city was without water for literally almost a month. And that's just, it's hard to imagine that the capital city of a state going without drinking water, without water to bathe in or to drink for a month. And for years, people in Jackson have been drinking bottled water because they don't trust the water. And so there's just a continuing kind of breakdown of the water, basically the system itself. And so we're interested in that and become interested in that. Not just the drinking water, but also the sewage side of that as well in terms of treatment, because there's a large amount of partially treated waste that goes into the Pearl River, which of course is a drinking water, not just for Jackson, but for downstream as well.
Do you see that as fundamentally an infrastructure problem? Is that where it seems to all be breaking apart?
Yeah, the pipes in Jackson, a lot of them are 100 years old or more, some of them, and you can drive down certain streets in Jackson and literally see water just coming up, because the pipes are broken and literally coming up through the street. So you see those kinds of things. So there's been a real breakdown in the infrastructure system. within the past few decades, especially. And it's just they haven't had the funding, to be honest about it. And
so is that a political will problem as well?
yeah, I mean, that's what the interesting part. We're going to see how this all plays out. The city leaders have said they need about $1 billion each to fully replace and repair the water and sewage systems. But they only got 42 million, I think. Basically after Jackson got cited by the president himself as being one of the places that needed this kind of money, in the end, that this city wound up with 42 million. Is that enough? I don't know. We'll see, to be able to fix some of the problems, but certainly there's a lot of problems. I mean, driving around Jackson, you'll notice these things. It's just a continuing problem, and then the other contributing, it's not necessarily that the roads are part of the problem, but if you go in and you have to tear up the road, if you follow what I'm saying, to fix these pipes, then you've also got another problem, if you follow what I'm saying. So it's and so you've kind of got two sets of problems in connection with that as well. But it's and the Rural Water Association is a big issue. And up here on the screen, it mentions about this little town in Leflore County, which is where Greenwood is. They lost their well, which is how a certain number of rural places, what they rely on for water. And so they went without a year, for more than a year without water. And so there are a lot of examples of this, and or these rural water systems that get chemicals get in there. Maybe you've got some kind of business or factory or whatever that's dumping some of these chemicals and things like that. And that gets into, people don't realize that when you dump these things, it gets into the water table, and it obviously affects people's drinking water. And that's why I think what Consumer Reports is doing here is so important, to test this water and to be able to see, hey, is this safe to drink?
Yeah, you presaged two of my questions there beautifully. So I did want to zoom out to,
Sure.
We talked about Jackson, zoom out to the state a little. How much do you think that the things that folks see in Jackson and that need for investment, is that playing out in every
Yes.
urban or mid-sized town in the state?
Well, yeah, there are needs way beyond what the funding that for the infrastructure didn't even begin to cover all the needs that are around the state. Whether you're talking about smaller municipalities, which typically do have some kind of water system, or if you're talking about there are a lot of across the state we call water associations, and these are independent. And the problem there, it's not, there may be some that are incredibly well run, but then on the other hand, you have some that are not. And that's the problem. There's really not much oversight into these water associations. And
right.
And so the water quality can vary quite a bit. And they have boil water alerts, I think, just over the past few years. I think it was I counted up something like 26 of Mississippi's 82 counties had boil water notices. So it's a real problem in the state.
Yeah, and then I guess if you think about the multiplicity of problems here, everything from things leaching into old pipes to chemicals in the groundwater to the kind of bacteria rise that leads to a boil notice to all those sorts of things. What do you think that the Consumer Reports, and I'm going to say again, we're going to get into what we hope to test for a little bit later in the call, but what's your hope in as someone who's been covering this for a while, that we can add to that drumbeat? And obviously we're not going to be able to identify everything in that laundry list of stuff.
Well, I think it provides an important snapshots. We're getting important snapshots of what we are really seeing on the, at the ground level with drinking water in Mississippi. And I think that's so valuable for a state that really, to be honest, struggles with this. And So it's, I can't think of anything more important than safe drinking water. In fact, I just got back from Africa. And so it's such a reminder. I mean, I think people have no idea and they just presume that what comes out of the tap is safe. And that's not necessarily the case. I certainly saw that when I was there, and it certainly, they're much more cognizant of it there than we are here. And I think people automatically assume anything that comes out of the tap is safe, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I actually would be really curious to know, because I think there's a certain amount of self-selection. If you've bothered to come and join us on this webinar, you've probably been thinking about water quality in some way, shape, or form. But I'm curious, so I just launched a poll. Hopefully that's popping up on your screen right now. I'm curious, have you ever checked the quality of your tap water? And has this something, don't worry, this is a thoroughly unscientific poll. I'm just trying to get a vibe off the room, see what folks here have done in the past. Looks like, let's see, most folks dueling back and forth here through checking your public water reports, and no, you've not checked it yourself. Okay, this is good to know. And it looks like some people, the person who said the person who said you tested your well water, or the person who is saying that you got it through some other method, just drop it in the chat. Like, what did you use, and what did you find? Was it something that bolstered your confidence in your water? Was it something that made you think, oh, bottled water for me for the rest of my life? Just drop that in the chat. Thank you. So it looks like, yeah, we sort of, I will share this back at you, but this is the representation for this group. It looks like about 35% of you said you check your water report, and more than half of you have not checked your water before. So that's a great entree into what we will hopefully be doing with you all today. I mentioned, to carry on with the polls here, I mentioned PFAS at the top of the discussion. So before I go any further, I'm going to bring you in, Jim. Tell us about what PFAS are, and then I'll get people a shot at this question.
Hi, okay. So PFAS are a group of chemicals that have been manufactured to help with coatings on nonstick pans. They're water repellent, grease repellent. So sometimes they coat food contact surfaces, the little boat that you get your French fries in, the wrapping papers, because it prevents moisture and oil from coming through, and also firefighting flame retardants. And these chemicals are considered also forever chemicals because of the chemical makeup. They last for a very long time. It's hard for them to be broken down. And what the concern about this is that we have associated PFAS chemicals with a number of different human illnesses, which can include decreased fertility, certain hormonal changes in people. They can increase your blood level of cholesterol. They can weaken your immune system and increase cancer risks and growth and learning delays in infants and children. So there are about 3,400 of them right now. The industry makes new ones because there have been these disease issues associated with the old ones. So they're trying to make new ones. But it's kind of difficult because it's hard to test to see how the new ones are affecting people. So that's just a general idea of what PFAS chemicals are.
Yeah, we can dig in a little more there. This is maybe a little bit of a, based on that explanation, you can probably see where we're going with this question, but true or false? Newer PFAS chemicals, the new generation, are safer than the older chemicals that have been linked to a number of diseases. What do y'all think? Looks like we're maybe 3/4 of you are going towards false so far. Thoroughly unscientific. You will not be graded. No one's going to be held accountable for your answers here. But this is sort of a nice way to check in with where people are on the issue of PFAS and how much we all already know. I'll give it another 10, 15 seconds. Right. Looks like you all ended at about 25% true, 75% false. We think that this is a false one, and we think that it's a false question mostly because we don't know yet. So as Jim was just saying, we know that forever chemicals are getting into the water. We know that they're getting into our bodies in different ways, but because they are manufacturing new PFASs all the time, it can be very difficult to keep up with what the new ones are and getting the sort of longitudinal data you need to know for sure that the new ones are safe. But so far, we suspect the testing that we have done, we don't know yet, but it's not looking like the new ones are doing anything that the old ones didn't do in terms of affecting our health. Jim, I also bring you back and ask, so what did the EPA weigh in on PFAS recently?
So we have seen a number of reports that finally some of our regulatory agencies are really looking into PFAS closely. Some of our attendees may have read that, for instance, the FDA just recently notified a company that there were high enough detectable levels of PFAS in seafood, a certain seafood. And so it's been a little bit of a long-term time coming, in my opinion, where they've actually been focusing on this. But in water especially, we feel that whatever levels they have set for PFAS in water, that they're way too high. We believe that the actual safe level is much lower than our EPA has set. And as we may talk about later, the requirements for testing are basically once a year for each water municipality, water system. And so they only have to tell you once a year what PFAS levels could be when they do test for it.
All right. And then I want to do one more just general taking the temperature of the room question here. Have you gotten a boil notice in the last year at your home? And I see Kay jumping in the chat and saying frequent reports and boil water notices are just getting to both the combination of people being alerted and then also fatigued by trying to keep up with fatigue in Jackson. Katie asks, assume you mean a boil notice in the last week. So it sounds like for some of you, this is a daily part of everyday activity. It's interesting, just so as you know, again, thoroughly unscientific, but it looks like a lot of folks have weighed in here. So I'll just go ahead and share back. About half of you have gotten some sort of boil notice in the last year. And sounds like some of you are getting boil notices all the dang time. And that it sort of is hard to keep up with when there's not a boil notice on, right? Like something that's even like, when is this even safe for a moment to drink?
Yeah, could I make a note, Alan?
Please.
I just want to let our attendees know that usually when they issue boil water notices, it's because the level of bacteria is so high that whatever water treatment that they're doing is not removing those bacteria. And so they're actually telling you to boil your water so you can kill those bacteria that can come from fecal material, et cetera. And you can also have viruses like hepatitis, et cetera, in your water. So that's why they're trying to get you to boil your water, just for the bacteria. But boiling will do nothing about the chemical contamination that we've been talking about. And so you're removing the bacteria, but if there's any chemical contamination still there, it does nothing to remove that. Yeah.
Interesting. So that people are saying sometimes it's from high levels of bacteria, as Jim was mentioning, and then loss of pressure, line breaks, all sorts of reasons why the water is not showing up. And also in interest, I mean, I want to really underline what Jim just said, because now we're going to start talking about testing, what we hope to test for in your water. But there's a whole category of thing that is happening in these boil notices that our testing is not even going to cover. So we're going to talk later on in this afternoon about not just the lab testing that Jim and I are going to run, but also just gathering stories about everything else. You know, the breaks, the low pressures, the bacteria, all that other category of thing that is keeping you all from having, turn on the tap and something useful comes out. So let's go back, Jim. Tell us exactly what we hope to test for and what we tested for actually in the national level study we did in 2020.
Okay, so as the slide lines out, we're going to test for 30 PFAS chemicals, or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Those are the forever chemicals we've discussed before. Now, you heard me say that there are a couple thousand of them already that we know are being used, and you're saying, well, why only 30? Well, the testing ability of laboratory lags behind the number of new PFAS chemicals that are made every year. And so for the laboratory that we use, it's a certified laboratory that specializes in testing for these chemicals that we have used before, Consumer Reports. They can only test 30 and specifically identify these 30. And so that's the best we can do right now. We will also test for heavy metals, lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury. I saw in some of the chats that they were worried about lead and arsenic. Those are the major two that we have seen in the past. As you know, that these chemicals are linked with IQ effects to children, cancer in people. And so we'll test for those heavy metals. The goal is to get at least one, more hopefully two testers in every county in Mississippi, so we can try to cover the entire state. We will actually take extra samples in urban areas because that reflects a higher population base. And so it'll demonstrate a little bit of exposure. And then 30 additional tests of people that are on well water, because we have found in our previous testing that sometimes people on well water have as bad or worse issues with their water quality because of various things seeping in from the soil into their wells and so on. We've done this before. We did a national test back in 2021 where we tested water across the country. And I urge you to go to CR and take a look at that study and what we did.
And also have that dropped in the chat here. So
yeah, it was in the chat. Yeah. We've also tested bottled water. So if bottled water is one of your alternative sources for drinking water, we did a bottled water test about 2 years ago that for these same chemicals to show some of the things that we detected in that too. So that's basically what we're trying to do with this test. Yes, it's limited. It's limited primarily by resources, but we're doing the best we can for what we got. So,
yeah, I mean, and I think that to Jerry's point from before, and Jerry, I want to bring you in if you want to add anything again, but whether or not you want to come back in and talk about that sort of snapshot idea again, because as people are saying, like, there are multiple water associations in many different counties, and there are sort of different directions that you could go drill all the way down. I mean, you could really do block by block testing in Jackson if you wanted to get that level. So a little bit about like kind of what you think maybe about this snapshot and what you hope comes out of it.
Yeah, and that's what we're hoping to do is, get a snapshot around the state, and we're trying to dig in also to some data that is available. I know, like for the city of Jackson, for example, collecting all those boil water notices for the past several years, and then utilizing those to try to dig down in, okay, which areas have been the hardest hit and those kind of things to take a look at it. And I wanted to mention, because I didn't mention it before, I think the link got posted, I guess get posted again. But if people have stories, we would love to hear them. I mean, because I think one of the best way to tell the, to kind of capture this detail is through people, people's stories. Have you had a bad experience with your water association, and maybe there's a problem that they've never really cleared up, and or whatever it is, whatever your the problems maybe you've had with the municipal system. I mean, whatever it is that you've experienced, we would be interested in that, and we do have a link whereby they can if you're interested in sharing your story, you can do that, and it'll get to us.
Yeah, and I want to, I think that's really useful. And I think that sort of qualitative versus quantitative data here, right? We want to get these individual stories of your experiences, and we want to map them in addition to our sort of like, you know, if the nationwide study we did was a 50,000 foot view, then the testing we're going to do in Mississippi is maybe, you know, 7 to 10,000 feet, and then these individual stories can go all the way down to a 10 foot level. So another call for that. I want to really quickly. So two things that I want to double down on here. One is we have 156 tests that we want to do. That breaks down again to a conversation about one in every county. So that's 82. And then we're going to do oversampling in a few urban areas. And then we're going to do 30 wells. So that means that it's not guaranteed that everyone, even on this call, necessarily will be picked for this process. What we need to do is we need to find as many people who are willing to help us as possible. And then we'll sit down with our statistician and try to figure out exactly where we can get the most out of those tests and tell a really complete story. So as you know, as Ken was dropping in there, hopefully you can get tests from some of the people with wells across the street from the landfills in southern Madison County. You know, if we have something that pops up on our map there, and then we can kind of use that as one in our one of our 30 well allocation tests, that would be fantastic. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the process. And just as you see on your screen right here, what we're asking for people to do as part of the testing is follow what we hope are some fairly simple and easy to understand steps, but we kind of have to get them right. And you know, we need to make sure that we nail these steps. Everyone does them exactly the same, and also that we you know, we'll try to cluster this testing, so everyone will be testing across the state in and around the same week, or maybe week and a half window. So more details on all that to come, but essentially, we'll email kit. We'll give you some trainings, including a training video about how to do this sample collection. What you're going to do is you're going to turn the tap on for 5 minutes to flush out the lines. You're going to fill the sample bottles that we provide in the kit. They're bottles for the heavy metal testing, and then shaped and labeled bottles for the PFAS testing. It comes out of the same tap, but those are different bottles. Then you're going to use cold tap water. Jim, why do we ask people to flush the line for 5 minutes?
So what we want is the freshest water that comes through the tap. And so if you do not run the tap and do it in the morning, what you'll basically get is the stuff that's been sitting in your lines overnight, which may be an over exaggeration of what you're really actually seeing. So we prefer you to flush the lines, then let's see what's going into your house from the street. And cold water is best, so we don't have any effects of your hot water tanks or anything like that.
Again, there is a little bit of acknowledge a little bit of tension there between trying to get a sense of what's happening at the municipal level and maybe what's happening that first second when you first turn your water on in the morning. But this test will give you a sense, like, should you let your water run a little bit in the morning? Maybe that's a good idea before you start drinking. Let's see, anything else about this process, Jim, that you want to highlight? I will say, you know, we are very extraordinarily appreciative of your willingness to even, you know, raise your hand and do this with us. It was an all volunteer army when we did this in 2020, and it was a real pleasure to kind of get to know folks as I was figuring out where they were testing and helping them go through the process. So it's citizen science, and we appreciate you being a citizen engaging with the science with us. What else, Jim?
Three main things. Number one is, when we did this before, one of the issues we found is that people did not cap the bottles tight enough. And so we did have leakage. And so for some citizens, we had to send them another box to sample yet again. So don't want you to crush the top where it splits or anything, but just make sure it's seated very well. Second thing is, we are providing you the mailing labels, the shipping labels, the boxes, and all the rest of that. And it's important that you adhere to the water collection date and the shipping date, because the lab, we're staging samples to the lab. And so we're giving the lab the number of samples they could handle that day. And so we don't want you to wait or lag. We just want to make sure that you get it within the scheduled time. And then the third thing, read any paperwork that's in there, fill it out, make sure that you've provided all the information, because we do, number one, need some of that information like the date and the time, et cetera. But we also want to be able to send you your results too. So you know what is going on with your water from that sample that we're sending you. So follow the instructions, read the paperwork, fill out the paperwork, ship on time, make sure that the cap is tight.
So Drew, does that last point does answer your question there? Yes, we're going to report back to you specifically what we found in your water, and then we'll also we're going to write up a report and try to do a snapshot of the state as a whole. Tom, I very much do take your point that one test per county is not going to do a lot to monitor the myriad of rural water associations in Mississippi. I do think, though, that any individual snapshot like this will do a good job of, well, our hypothesis is it will do a good job of showing sort of the need for investment and taking this problem seriously at a statewide level. And that's really kind of fundamentally where a lot of the money for infrastructure investments and improvements and all that stuff is going to come from. It's not, this study is not going to solve which of the different rural water associations needs the most money, but it is going to say, hey, there's a big problem here, and we assume that problem is statewide, and that means there really is sort of a call for statewide action. So I want to make sure we get on, but push forward real quick so I see a couple more questions, but I'm going to zip through them for one second to tell you the different volunteer things that we'd like to do with you over the next couple of months. So we already covered testing municipal water. We need help finding other people. Right now we have 58 of the 82 counties covered. And not surprisingly, more people have signed up in urban centers than in rural areas. So I'm going to throw up a list later on in the slides, but also I will send you an email with other locations. Who do y'all know? And if I saw someone at the very beginning introducing themselves, I think it was Carol, saying that you live in one county and you work in another county. Maybe there's ways that we can sort of fill in some of this testing with multiple access address points. Anyway, we're very much going to try to work with you over the next month or so to fill out this map of Mississippi, make sure that we are at the very least getting these tests in the counties and locations we want them. Jerry already mentioned sharing your story. That's incredibly important for adding texture to this snapshot. I think one thing that we're going to start doing, and again, this will all be captured in an email, so don't fret too much as it goes by. I would love for people to collect those, if sometimes, daily, weekly, monthly boil warnings or other public health notifications about your water, and send them to me, and send them to us so that we can continue to add. Again, this is just texture to the overall state of play. And then once we get this all shipped off to the labs and we get our results back, and that's probably going to take into the fall for the labs to do their work, and then we'll do a write-up and we'll have this document, which is going to be advocating, hopefully we can use to advocate for water access and for safety legislation stuff, and investment where that investment is needed. That's listed here because we would love to continue to stay in touch with y'all, depending on what you find individually, but also what we find as a statewide. Hopefully, Calvin and myself and the sort of organizing wing of Consumer Reports, we can lend some of our time and maybe also power as a megaphone and as a convener to see what we can change along those lines. A little bit more texture on share your story. we're looking for anything that's sort of water quality, hotspots, concerns, stories that we might miss in the testing we've outlined so far. Yes, Ken, I will definitely add in where you can send your boil notices and etc. That'll be different than share your story. So I apologize that there are so many different places and different ways these can happen, but we've got, consider the share your story, the bad case or the individual story that you heard that you really have to get off your chest, and the boil notices and those sorts of things. I'll give you a procedure for how you can send and when we will continue to send those things. And yes, Dina, fear not. Everything that we have dropped into this chat will also be represented in this email. I'm warning you now, this email gets long. We've sent it before, it's a doozy, but it's all there. Thank you very much, Riley, for raising a hand and saying you can recruit. On your screen right now are the places where we have 0 volunteers. So this is, if you guys know people in these places, drop a note right now to yourself to connect them with Alan and see if they want free water testing from Consumer Reports at their home. But these are the places where we have not yet found anybody. And these are the places where we've only found one person. Now, there's a possibility that we only need one person in each of these state counties, but life happens, people go on vacation at the wrong time, or they decide they have to move or whatever else. And we would love to have more than one person in each of the counties and in each of the sort of slots in our testing, so that in case someone, for whatever reason, can't deliver a good test, that we have a backup and we can sort of tap that person in. So yeah, those are the 2 places. Again, here's the big list of all the places where we have nobody. And here is the slightly smaller list of places where we have one person at all. And yeah, we can definitely send out social ways to share this on social media. We have all of those things. Great, Ivy, I'll hold you to that. Maybe you can do an email introduction to me. That would be fantastic. So then I alluded to the fact that this is all leading up to a mapping of all the data we've collected together. I think we jumped in the nationwide study that we did. And so you have a sense of maybe kind of what we might be able to do in terms of data visualization and in terms of kind of mapping the different layers of problem here. Working together to find ways to invest in and fix the Mississippi water system. So, knowledge about what is in your water is good, but it's not always everything. As Fran asked in the Q&A, I filter my drinking and cooking water. Does that remove chemicals and PFAS? Jim, I think that the answer is no to that. You want to give some texture to that? No?
Well, I think it's more, it depends. There are certain filters, always, right? There are certain filters that filter out certain things. And so what you have to look out at is read the box of your filter, the insert, and see if it says it filters out PFAS. What I've read is that you tend to have to either get a very expensive filter or get something called a reverse osmosis filter, and that's usually under your sink. But the key is to first read the insert, and it'll tell you what it can filter out, and then make your decision if you have to upgrade or change the filter unit that you use, the carafe if you're using that, etc. So that would be my advice for that one.
And again, we don't want to just simply equip you all with knowledge about something that might be damaging your health and then walk away. We want to make sure that this is useful, and Calvin and I and other folks at CR are connecting. Some of you, hopefully on this call, we've already talked with. People have been doing lead testing in Mississippi for a while, so we have some background information, and we have people like Jerry who have been really on this point for a long time. And so, we are building one snapshot in this, but it needs to be leading up to something. And so that is the kind of the more to come that I am alluding to. So any other questions? And as I wait for these questions to come in, I don't think there's anything super outstanding here that I've missed. But drop something into Q&A if I have, and keep using chat. I want to bring you back again, Jerry, as these questions come in, to say, what do you, any reactions to the stuff that Jim and I just went through here? What else has popped up in your mind?
Just whatever information they have that they think would be helpful to share would be great. I think that's as reporters, we depend on people to share their stories, to share the information they have, and that helps us. And of course we'll go and check things out. Maybe we'll check records or data or whatever to ascertain. Maybe someone tells us about one problem, and then that leads us to deeper dive into that particular, let's say, rural water association. We find out, oh, they haven't had a meeting in 2 years. You know what I mean? Things like that we can find out about, maybe just by people just sharing simple information that, we wouldn't have known necessarily about that without being passed on.
Great, thank you. And I'm seeing a couple of very good questions vis-a-vis timeline. So here's where we are. We're recording this session. We're sending it out to everybody, and then there's going to be, as is always the case, a lot of folks who couldn't make this particular time. So those folks will also get a chance to watch this video back and weigh in. So I'm giving us another month from today, essentially, to recruit. So through mid-August to get all of those things, all those spots filled. And as I get more and more desperate, calling people up in different zip codes around the state to nail those last couple of locations. And then we'll sit down and really send out an email to everyone who we hope to test your water, and then everybody who we hope to have as a backup tester on or around September 1st. So that's the notification process. In that notification process, there'll be a couple more triple check to make sure that we're testing the right water and that we're actually getting what we think, making sure that, yes, you are on a well, if that's what you said, or yes, you are on municipal water, if that's what you said. And then once that happens and we have everybody locked in, we're looking at October to mail the kits out, which means that then the lab should have results back to us that we can share with you by hopefully earlier, but I'll say Christmas to cover my butt. So yes, I hope that answers everybody's questions. Can we sample from public water fountains in counties where you don't have a volunteer residing? That's a really interesting question. Let me get back to you on that, Mike. I think that we're looking for home tap as a primary goal, but I think that the main challenge there would be timing and making sure that everything is kind of happening in the batches that we would like it to all happen with. So thank you for that volunteer idea. I will think on that. Carol, that's very useful, but I'm going to need, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to keep track of that right now. So there'll probably be a back and forth as we over email as we get closer to the moment. And then I'm seeing a couple questions about filters in general. So we would like samples of unfiltered water from your location. So if you have an under sink filter, or you use sort of filter that comes into your house in some way, shape, or form, we would like to not test that water. We're trying to get a pretty good snapshot of what would be coming out of your tap if you didn't take precautions in some way, shape, or form. So that might mean testing from a secondary faucet, but we can go back and forth about getting us an unfiltered tap water example. That's right, Jim. We don't want something that's already been super filtered.
Yeah, I think for the most effective advocacy later on down the road, we want to be able to say this was tap water that the majority of Mississippians have access to. Because as we discussed, a lot of this affects poor people, people of color. And so it'd be better on the advocacy side, especially to have what actually comes out the tap, since the majority of the folks there, that's what they drink.
Question, are refrigerator water filters generally effective at removing contaminants? I think, again, Jim, the answer to that is it depends.
Depends.
Depends on the contaminant, right?
Some are better than others. Some types of filters are better than others. CR does test filters, and it's free. It's in front of the paywall. You take a look at it, of our water filter testing of what we have seen. But again, you got to read the label, see what it can filter out, and then look at various ratings, et cetera.
Dina, I'll make sure to include, I don't have that link at my fingertips right now, but I'll make sure to include that in the email that we send around. Thank you all. Thank you for coming and taking your an hour of your day to come hang out with us and ask us all these excellent questions. As one more follow-up, again, there will be one massive email that I'm about to send out with links, slides that we ran through a recording of this webinar. The email will also contain forms for how to send us all the things we've talked about, including the boil notices, your individual stories, all those sorts of things. Yeah, so Rick, we do try, when we send you your results, we do try to recommend, we try to help you translate what those results mean. We're not just going to send you a bunch of a spreadsheet full of alarming numbers. So we recommend, you know, if the problem is lead, here's the things that we recommend. If the problem is PFAS, here's the things we recommend, so that you can have some version of those action items that you could possibly take. And Riley, one more time, the number of end samples needed, we're going to end up doing 156 samples. And that is one in every county, some oversampling of urban areas, and then 30 well samples on top of all of that. So we need lots of people to get in all of those locations. And I would also add that, you know, not every person who signs up is going to get the water test portion of this, but there are so many other things, from the sharing your story to the sending us your boil notices to the eventual advocacy that we hope to do on this issue, that I think that a lot of folks can benefit from being a part of this, even if that particular person is not getting the water quality. Thank you all. Thank you for your time. Jerry, I'm going to give you a last word if you want it.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for showing up. I can tell everyone is really engaged here, and it's very exciting. And to see all these Mississippians that are really interested in clean water Mississippi, which is it's an incredibly important project, incredibly exciting. And so we're very happy to work with each of you. So thanks for coming today. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Give me a couple of hours to get all of my things shipshape on the back end. And so I'll say, look for this omnibus email to be landing in your inboxes sometime tomorrow morning. And with that, have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming. Talk to you soon.